Hi, welcome back, Thresholds and Transits. My name is Megan. I am happy that you're here. Today is Mercury in Pisces on March 7th, 2026. Something in your life you've been trying to hear for weeks gets loud on March 7th. We are just a few days out from a Mercury Cazimi, March 7th, 16 degrees and 52 minutes of Pisces. Mercury meets the sun at the exact midpoint of its retrograde, and for a window of a couple of hours, something that has been obscured, something circling in the back of your mind for weeks, comes into focus. Let's talk about what that means structurally, technically, mythologically, because this Cazimi sits inside a trine to an exalted Jupiter in Cancer, and that combination in Hellenistic framework carries something very specific. It carries the image of the mother who knows. So we're going to move through the technique, the myth, and the collective context, and by the end, you will understand why March 7th is worth treating as a threshold that you're crossing over rather than just noting down Cazimi is on March 7th. So if you don't know me, my name is Megan. I am an astrology student, and I am learning. And as I'm learning and reading and exploring, and I am sharing. And a little bit ago, my teacher said, okay, it's time for me to start making content and also to start offering readings. So you can find all sorts of information on my website, which is meganriley.eu. One of the tabs that might be interesting to you is a tab that says astrology. And on that, you can sign up for a donation-based reading. So I just ask that there be an exchange of some kind of energy exchange. So I live in Central European time, and there you can find days, kind of all times and days all throughout the day, scheduled a few weeks out. If you cannot find a time because of your time zone, then just send me an email, megan@meganriley.eu, and we will figure something out. Just a couple of notes. I'm offering whole sign tropical chart readings. I'm not to transits yet. I'm not comfortable offering transit readings. We can look at some transits that I can understand, but I can't offer a transit reading. So stay tuned for that. And also, what will happen? What will happen about this? What will happen about that? That's not what I'm doing. I can do a fair chart reading, and I'm happy to, if you are interested and if this work appeals to you, that you would like that. Please do sign up for that. I would love to talk to you. My own chart, I hear that's a question, is I have a Scorpio sun at 21 degrees, a Scorpio rising at 29 degrees, and a Cancer moon at 1 degree. Okay, let's get started. So meganriley.eu for any more information. What is a Cazimi? Cazimi is a term from an Arabic-derived medieval astrology. It comes from kasmini, meaning as if in the heart. A planet is Cazimi when it is within 17 minutes of arc of an exact conjunction. So not a degree, but minutes. The broader phenomenon that sits within is combustion. A planet within roughly 8 degrees of the sun is considered combust. So it's weakened and obscured. It's burned by the solar proximity. Think of it as trying to see a candle standing next to a bonfire. The candle's still there, but you just can't see it. Combustion for Mercury is particularly notable because Mercury is always within a relatively close range of the sun. Mercury never gets more than 28 degrees from the sun, and unlike the outer planets, which can stand in full opposition to the sun across from the sky, Mercury and Venus live very close. They are never far from solar light. Cazimi inverts this. So when Mercury is within 17 minutes of the sun, the logic flips. The planet is no longer overwhelmed by the light. It is inside the light. It is in the heart of the light. The Hellenistic and medieval tradition treated this as a position of extraordinary power. The planet has the ear of the king. To be in the heart is to be heard directly. So what does that mean? Mercury is the planet of perception and communication and language and analysis, the exchange of information. Mercury retrograde in Pisces has been operating in the dissolved, impressionistic, boundaryless waters of that sign since February 25th. The retrograde station was at 22 degrees Pisces. Mercury has been moving backward through Pisces, through this sign of the ocean, the unconscious, the place where the boundary between self and everything else gets thin. In Pisces, Mercury perceives in images or gut feelings, in things that are hard to articulate, curved lines rather than straight ones. The retrograde deepens that even more, and the inner world has been louder than the outer world for the last 10 days. March 7th is the midpoint. Mercury meets the sun at 16 degrees and 52 minutes. And for those hours, what has been circling in the Piscean deep gets a direct line to the solar center. Something that you have been trying to hear finally gets loud enough to understand. Let's layer in the Thema Mundi framework here because it changes how we read this Cazimi. In the Thema Mundi, the birth chart of the world itself, it's the cosmological template that Hellenistic astrology uses to derive why signs mean what they mean. Pisces sits on the 9th house cusp. So the 9th house is the house of Jupiter in two ways. Jupiter rules Pisces, and the 9th is Jupiter's other home, a sign that governs higher knowledge and long journeys and divination and philosophy and the sacred. Demetra George, in Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice, talks about this. The 9th house carries its meaning because of what Pisces is and what Jupiter rules. Jupiter dissolves the limits of what the local mind can hold. Pisces is the sign where the boundary between your individual consciousness and something larger becomes permeable. The 9th house operates at the ceiling of this local knowledge. It is where you move beyond what you can directly see and begin to perceive structurally and philosophically, cross-culturally, across time. Mercury in Pisces is Mercury operating in the 9th house of the world chart. The planet of information processing is working in the domain of where information becomes transpersonal, where the question shifts from what is the data to what does the data mean in the context of everything. So when Mercury meets the sun in Pisces at the Cazimi, when the planet of language and perception is in the heart of the solar light, inside the sign and the house of sacred knowledge, what is being illuminated is understanding. It's the kind of understanding that we cannot rush, we cannot force, and Pisces season is designed to deliver us. So what have you been circling for weeks that finally makes sense? This is the piece that I'm most interested in exploring, the maternal blessing. And it's the trine between Mercury Cazimi in Pisces and Jupiter in Cancer. And it's the interpretive heart of this whole transit. So Jupiter is retrograde in Cancer on March 7th. It's moving backward through the sign of its exaltation, its home. Jupiter in Cancer is Jupiter at its most nourished, most receptive, most capable of offering its genuine abundance. The exaltation of Jupiter in Cancer reflects the structural logic that Hellenistic astrology uses to assign dignity. Jupiter, the planet of expansion and wisdom and the philosophical overview, is honored in Cancer because Cancer is the sign of the moon, the body, the container, the place where life is held and fed before it's ready to move into the world. Jupiter in Cancer is the grandmother who knows the whole story, the one who has seen enough cycles to recognize the pattern when it comes back around again. the one whose knowledge arrived through blood and milk and time and repetition rather than argument or credential. It lived in the body, accumulated in the body, and held there. It's a durable form, the knowledge of someone who has actually been through it. The exaltation in Hellenistic astrology signals that a planet is in its sign where it is recognized, honored, elevated. Demetra George says in ancient astrology that it's the planet is being received, welcomed into a sign as a guest welcomed into a home, where the host knows how to take care of them. Jupiter in Cancer is received. Jupiter in Cancer is fed. At my favorite hotels, no matter where I stay around the world, at those hotels, they know what kind of pillows I like, how firm I want my bed, what I order for breakfast, and how I like my coffee. And it translates all across the world. Jupiter in Cancer is this. Now, Jupiter's retrograde, and it stations direct on March 10th, 3 days after the Cazimi. So at the moment of the Cazimi, Jupiter is at its slowest, most interior, most reflective. The expansive blessing planet is as turned inward as it ever gets. The planet that naturally looks outward and expands and travels and teaches and philosophizes has been moving backwards since November 2025. So for 4 months, Jupiter in Cancer retrograde has been asking, what do you actually believe? Like the real version of what you believe. What's in your body? What do you know in your body, in your gut, in the lineage that you carry? What the retrograde strips away is the performative version, what we think we need to be like, the mask, the public version, what we think is acceptable in rooms that we occupy. And it's almost done asking that. So in 3 days it turns direct, and the moment it receives the trine from Mercury Cazimi, it is at the still point. It is at the strongest and the most amplified, the hinge between retrograde and direct. The trine is a very harmonious aspect. It's 120 degrees, and it's between elements, planets of the same element. Pisces and Cancer are both water signs. The communication between them is easy. It's fluid, natural, unobstructed. The Hellenistic tradition, Chris Brennan says in Hellenistic astrology, treats the trine as an aspect of cooperation. The two planets can see each other clearly and are inclined to assist. There's no friction in a trine. The energy moves without obstacle. Now let's look mythologically. In the Homeric hymn to Demeter, the primary source text for the myth of Demeter and Persephone, the structure of the story is a descent and a search and a recognition. Persephone is taken. Demeter searches the whole world. The earth goes cold. Nothing grows. And then the moment of recognition arrives. Persephone is found. Her bond is restored. And the world blooms again. That moment of recognition in the hymn is specifically a moment of clarity arriving through the dark. The mother has been searching in grief. The knowledge of where her daughter is doesn't come through rational inquiry. The gods are telling her to give up. It comes through this accumulated pressure of her refusal to stop looking, to accept the loss or move on. The recognition breaks through. Demetra George in Asteroid Goddesses reads this myth centrally through the concept of the mother's non-negotiable knowing. The mother does not doubt that Persephone is findable. She doesn't accept the god's narrative that it's simply how it is. Her knowing is stronger than the institutional story being told over her. That's the architecture of March 7th. So Mercury in Pisces, retrograde, interior, moving through the underworld of the unconscious, meets the sun and receives a direct trine from an exalted interior Jupiter in Cancer. The messenger is in the depths. The wisdom is in the mother's house. And they're speaking to each other in a language that moves without effort. It's through water. It's between two bodies that know how to speak because they've always known that language. And the framing here, and I want to name it clearly, is The blessing arriving through this trine moves through the maternal lineage, the accumulated understanding carried in the body, in the water signs, in the intuitive knowing that patriarchal systems has devalued precisely because it cannot be owned, it cannot be patented, it can't be instrumentalized or cited as evidence in the systems that count to them. Wisdom handed down from an authority that is invisible to them. You cannot peer review the grandmother's knowing. You cannot put it in a double-blind study, and that has been used as grounds to dismiss the knowledge. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, The Women Who Run with the Wolves, writes about what she calls the natural knowing. It's this instinctual intelligence that functions below the threshold of rational articulation, that has been trained out of most women, specifically because it bypasses the systems that require mediation through male authority. She's describing this cognitive capacity that has been systematically interrupted because it is inconvenient to structures that depend on women not trusting themselves. It's a political condition, not a spiritual one. March 7th, Cazimi, in the framework of this transit, is that kind of knowing. That it's not because the universe wants to give you a gift. It's because the sky is positioned in a way that the gift comes anyway. It's to bring what has been operating at the depth into full solar visibility. And Jupiter in Cancer, still reflective at the hinge point of its entire retrograde, is waiting to receive that clarity and confirm it. To say, yes, what you have known in your body, what you haven't been able to say yes to, what you haven't been able to give words to, what you've been doubting because everyone around you says you should doubt it. It's real. It counts. And the blessing of Jupiter in Cancer is not this grand expansion. It's the more durable gift of being confirmed in what you already know. You know what the answer is. You're just now getting the permission to know it. Let's spend some time on the feminist literature through line on this, because I think it reframes clarity. We think of clarity as the absence of confusion. The fog lifts. You can see the road. That's the mercurial understanding of clarity. That's Virgo Mercury. That's Mercury in Gemini. That's Mercury operating in the signs of its own domain. It's quick, precise, and informational. Receive information, move on. Mercury in Pisces operates in an entirely different register. Pisces dissolves the distinction between signal and noise, between the literal and the symbolic, between rational and the intuitive, between what can be measured and what can only be felt. Mercury in Pisces perceives in gestures, in resonances, in the way something feels before you know why it feels that way. The image that arrives unbidden and turns out to be more accurate than the analysis you could have given it. Hélène Cixous, in The Laugh of the Medusa in 1975, writes about what she calls feminine writing. But she means it's something bigger than just literary style. She's describing a mode of knowing and expression that is rooted in the body, in the unconscious, in the non-linear, in everything that phallogocentric reason, by which she means the logic systems built to support and center male authority, has excluded as too fluid, too irrational, and too much. She writes about woman having to write herself, to bring herself into the language, into visibility, from a place the existing systems cannot contain or co-opt. The body speaks, the unconscious surfaces, and the thing that cannot be argued into existence arrives anyway. This is the terrain that Mercury in Pisces occupies, and is writing about a structural situation, certain kinds of knowing that have been excluded from legitimacy because they don't move through the channels that they should, that the patriarchal knowledge systems control. the peer review, the citation trail, the rational argument that builds step by step from premises the institution agrees to recognize. Mercury in Pisces carries the knowledge that doesn't move through those channels. And during a retrograde, when Mercury is moving inwards through Pisces, through the domain of the unconscious and soul development and the body and the oceanic, that knowledge has been circling without a way to surface until now. And the Cazimi is the surfacing. Now let's bring in Adrienne Rich. Her work in Of Woman Born, 1976, is relevant to this. She makes this distinction in that book between motherhood as institution, the construction of what motherhood should be, the rules, requirements, performances, sacrifices, and motherhood as experience, which is the actual embodied, nonlinear, ungovernable thing that happens in the body and lives, that the institution tries and fails to ever understand or contain. The institution is Jupiter in Sagittarius, wisdom, philosophical framework, the doctrine. The experience is Jupiter in Cancer, body wisdom, inner knowing, the accumulated understanding that arrived through living. Grandmother whose authority comes from having been through it time and time and time again. When Jupiter in Cancer retrograde receives the trine from Mercury Cazimi in Pisces, the configuration is something specific. It is the experience of knowing trining the moment of articulation. The body-held wisdom receiving the moment of language. Rich was very clear that the institution of motherhood is designed to fragment women's experience. It's designed to interrupt the transmission of maternal knowing from woman to woman, to require mediation, to replace embodied knowledge with expert opinion. Her argument is political, but it maps directly onto this astrological configuration. The trine between Pisces and Cancer is the unmediated transmission of water sign knowing. There's no institution in the middle. There's no Saturn sitting at the gate deciding what counts. The message moves because the channel is open and because both bodies are in reception, are in water, and they know each other's language. Valens wrote in the Anthology, 2nd century CE, understanding the Mercury synodic cycle as describing phases of the soul's engagement with knowledge and communication. So he's writing from 2nd century CE, right, within the intellectual framework of that time, Hellenistic, Stoic, and patriarchal in its own specific way. But what he does describe is the inferior conjunction. What we are calling the Cazimi of the retrograde is that it represents the planting of a new cycle of perception. The soul in its most interior phase, the seed of the next full expression of Mercury, is being placed in the dark. You won't see it grow, but if you pay attention, you will know what was seeded. And the synthesis that I'm making here is this: the knowledge that gets placed at the Mercury inferior conjunction in Pisces in a trine to Jupiter in Cancer is specifically the knowledge the institution has not been transmitting, the knowledge that lives in the body, in the water, in the maternal lineage, in the Piscean oceanic awareness that holds everything and owns nothing. It is the grandmother's knowing, the wild woman's knowing, the pre-domesticated instinctual intelligence that knows before it can say why. And it is being seeded right now in you, in me, in whatever we are collectively working through in this charged astrological season. Jupiter in Cancer retrograde carries the full weight of the Demeter myth. And that myth includes grief and scorched earth and a mother willing to let everyone starve in order to receive her daughter. The maternal knowing is ungovernable and sometimes catastrophic. So the clarity of March 7th might include grief. It could include the understanding of something lost. It could be something withheld. It could be something in the body that has been holding that is too painful to finally name. But that's still clarity. That's still the body's truth surfacing, and we still have to allow it even if it's uncomfortable. There are two kinds of Mercury Cazimi. There's the inferior conjunction and the superior conjunction. The superior conjunction happens when Mercury is direct. It's moving ahead of the sun, on the far side of the sun from the earth. It represents the full phase of the Mercury cycle, fruition, clarity, the full moon of the Mercury loop. The inferior conjunction is what we have coming up. It happens when Mercury is retrograde between the earth and the sun. Mercury is closer to us than the sun. The sun is behind it, so this is the new moon of the Mercury cycle, a beginning hidden inside what looks like confusion. Valens wrote in the anthology, the Mercury synodic cycle in terms of what each phase makes available for the soul. The inferior conjunction specifically described as the planting phase, the moment a new cycle of perception is seeded before it has become visible, before it is actionable, which is still entirely interior. The Cazimi delivers understanding, what this period has been about, what's been circling, what the body already knew. The seed of the new way of thinking is planted in the moment of the Cazimi, and it will not flower until Mercury passes its shadow point in mid-April. March 7th is the planting, not the harvest. Mercury stations direct on March 20th at 8 degrees and 29 minutes of Pisces. Significantly, it conjoins the North Node on March 17th at 8 degrees and 58 minutes of Pisces, just before stationing. The messenger, at this moment, it turns direct, is exactly on the nodal axis. It's like its own mercurial eclipse. The direction of collective growth, and the arrow of fate turns. So, the seed planted on March 7th has a trajectory. It's pointed somewhere very specific. The Cazimi is the planting. The direct station on the North Node is the first green shoot. I'm seeing the first signs of spring here. The daffodils, paper whites are up. This is the first green shoot that we will see. Let's bring this into my own chart so you can see this happening. So I have Scorpio rising at 29 degrees. I have a Cancer moon and a Scorpio sun. Where Scorpio rising in the whole sign system, Pisces is my fifth house, the house of creative expression, children, pleasure, dating, sexuality, what I make and offer freely. The house that is in the Thema Mundi derives from Scorpio's position in the world chart. The depths where creation happens, Mars as the generative force, and the place where something moves from potential to form. A Mercury Cazimi in my fifth house is the moment a creative insight has been circling in this Piscean unconscious of my creative life. The images, the intuitions, the things that I've been unable to articulate yet about my work comes into solar light and it gets named. And Jupiter in Cancer, trining that Cazimi, lands in my ninth house in the whole sign. It's a sign of publishing, and teaching, and higher knowledge, the dissemination of ideas beyond the local, dissemination. Jupiter in Cancer in the ninth is the exalted grandmother's blessing of the expression of my work, my writing, my teaching, this channel, arriving from the domain of nourishment and body knowledge and the maternal. With my Cancer moon, I have this natal relationship with the Jupiter placement. So the moon and Jupiter are in the same sign in my chart in the sky right now. The sky is activating something in my natal Cancer territory from outside as well as inside. The retrograde Jupiter is asking me to go inward on what I believe about my capacity to reach people, to expand, what I believe about my capacity to teach. It's personal for me in a way that it won't be personal the same way for someone with a Sagittarius moon. So here is what I'm asking myself this week and coming up to the 7th. What have I been unable to say about my creative work that finally might be sayable? What understanding about where this is all going has been circling in the water without language attached to it yet? That's the question this is pointing to for me. So for you, find your Pisces in your whole sign chart. That's the house that's getting this Cazimi. Find Cancer. This is where the maternal blessing is coming from. The trine between them is the river between two kinds of water. Something is being carried along that river. I am not going to give you a ritual. I think you know why. Because all of the pop astrologers are telling you to light a candle and write an intention and fold it towards you 3 times and spin around in a circle. But here's what I will say. So March 7th is the day to be quiet enough to hear something. In the practical sense of, if something comes, a dream, a conversation, a phrase that appears in your head, a pattern you suddenly recognize, write it down. Not because Mercury retrograde demands that you journal, though I think astrological journaling is a great idea, because the inferior conjunction is a planting, and you will want to remember what gets seeded when it starts to grow. The trine from Jupiter in Cancer tells me that whatever clarity arrives on March 7th carries the weight of accumulated knowing. It's something that's been growing in the soil of lived experience and body knowledge and the maternal lineage, yours and the collective's, for longer than this retrograde has been running. It's the kind of knowing that Cixous was pointing towards when she wrote about feminine writing, the kind that carries its own authority, independent of institutional permission. Jupiter stations direct 3 days later on March 10th. The expansion begins to move forward. It moves outward again. The seed is planted and then the expansion begins. That sequencing is important. March 7th is the interior. The Cazimi is doing the work in the water. The movement and the expansion comes after.